The movie opens with Mark and his best friend named Walter in a car, discussing girls and how a teenager's first time making out should go. Walter tries his luck with two older women in a car nearby and they diss him by driving away. Mark makes fun of Walter as he tries to defend his move. Walter also slips out a hint of a surprise birthday party being held in honor of Mark back home. In the next scene, Mark is welcomed at the door. His mother named Tanya brings his cake and tells him to make a wish, which he does. He goes in to change and as he comes out, he spots his crush, Melanie, in a bikini, trying to find her way around the ropes of the bikini. She asks him for help to which he obliges but his mom butts in and sends him away. Downstairs, Mark's stepdad engages him in a conversation but he's absent-minded. Any man who lost his chance to tie the rope of his crush's bikini would be. Walter comes over and devises a plan to empty the house of Mark's parents, which Mark agrees to. When his mom tells him about a church service to be held soon, Mark uses the opening to get his parents out of the house. He immediately emails Walter to come over the next night. After that, Mark sets up things at the house. The next day, Walter comes over with Melanie and his girl. Meanwhile, Mark's mom already made arrangements with an old friend to keep Mark company, which ruins the whole plan. At the store, Mark picks out some items when a middle-aged woman strikes his attention. She inquires about some machine and he's struck by her figure. Outside, he sees her again and she introduces herself as Carissa Kensington. She also invites him to come over and help her fix the machine she bought, offering him payment for his services. He gladly obliges. While fixing her plumbing, she learns more about him. She says that she wants to test the shower and then invites him to join her. His pulse raced as he tries to catch his breath as he joins her. They make out and then fall in love with each other. The next day, Mark seems to be rather happy about something, which catches Tanya's attention immediately. He goes out and then tells Walter all about it. Later that night, he dresses up but doesn't tell his mom where he's heading. She bans him from using her car but is shocked when he doesn't need it. His date with Carissa goes well as she learns even more about his coding life and the app he's building. She offers to refer him to a friend of hers. When Carissa goes to the bathroom, some random guy drops a warning for him, saying she's bad news. The next morning, his mother sits him down to talk about his undisciplined movements the night before but he doesn't seem remorseful. He leaves the house again to go see Carissa, who tells him to meet her by the pool. He is amazed at the size of her house and learns that she's a widow. He rubs some cream on her and they make out. Later on, Mark's movements become more suspicious, which leads his mom to go through his phone while cleaning his laundry. She finds out about Carissa. She sends her a message through Mark's phone to come over for dinner. That evening, Carissa shows up to Mark's surprise and meets Tanya. Dinner becomes awkward, with all parties involved passing short pleasantries around. Carissa brings up Mark's app, which Tanya knows nothing about. Carissa goes on to say that Mark could skip school and land a great career at a young age. This doesn't go down well with Tanya, who unleashes her pent-up rage on Carissa about her frivolous idea. Tanya adds that Mark is still young to make such decisions but Carissa objects. In the next scene, Tanya complains bitterly to Randy, her husband, about Carissa as she leaves, implying that she might be a bad influence on Mark. Outside of the house, Carissa tells Mark to be a man of his decisions as he apologizes to her for his mom's reaction to her. He later leaves and follows Carissa to her house. In Carissa's house, they both start to make out in the pool while Mark's hands are cuffed to the ring of the pool. Back home, his mom seems worried but feels she should give him more privacy. Along the line, she finds out some details about the death of Carissa's ex-husband. The next morning, at Carissa's house, she suggests that they spend the day at the beach. As they try to deliberate on this, Carissa's alarm bell rings, which she picks up and finds out it is Tanya who is at the door. As Carissa opens up the door for Tanya, they both get into a heated argument as Tanya demands to see Mark, to which Carissa refuses and slams the door on her, collecting the food basket Tanya brought. Inside the house, as Mark tries to take a cloth to wear, he stumbles on a gun but returns it after he admires it. Later on, Carissa talks to Mark about moving in with her, which he rejects, saying he'll be going to summer school soon. Hearing this, she cancels their beach outing for the day and tells him to go home to see his mom. After that, Walter later comes to pick him up, bothering him with questions about what he did with Carissa. Walter, in his words, feels he should have accepted her offer to move in. Back at Mark's house, Tanya still complains to Randy about Carissa, saying she's worried about Mark being under a vicious siren spell, to which Randy gets alarmed, saying it's about daughters of the Greek god and mermaid-like creatures who tempt young sailors. He then advises her to let Mark make his mistake so that he can learn from it personally, to which she objects. Later, Mark gets on a video call with Carissa and apologizes. They both then conclude to meet the next day. As this goes on, Melanie comes to visit and Tanya welcomes her and asks her if she'd like to go out for a treat. As they both go out, Carissa is seen watching them from afar off. As Melanie gets back into her car, she gets attacked by Carissa inside the car, warning her to steer clear of Mark. The next morning, Mark calls Melanie but she doesn't pick up. Tanya later goes off to see Randy, to tell him about Melanie and Mark coming back together. but he rebukes her and says that she's trying to push everyone that cares away from her as he also leaves. Meanwhile, Mark continues to call Melanie but gets no answer. He resolves to stick with Melanie and do away with Carissa. After that, Carissa visits the aquarium where Randy works, to see him about the both of them coming together. As she says this, he abruptly mutters that she's a siren and tells her to leave. In the next scene, Walter goes to see Carissa at her house to tell her about what Mark told him about his decision to break up with her. Carissa goes to pick a knife, probably to slice up a pumpkin. In the next scene, Mark has a video call with Melanie but she sounds nervous and quickly ends the call. Immediately after that, Carissa calls Mark to pitch his app to her friend at Digital Intel to make him come over to her place. When he gets there and presents the app, the man tells him his idea has already been taken up by someone else. So, instead of buying his idea, the man offers Mark a job at his company. When Mark prepares to leave, Carissa doesn't let him and says she wants them to celebrate his new job. She later tricks him to look the other way and knocks him out with a bottle. Then she strings him up and makes love to him against his will. The next morning, Tanya feels worried that Mark hasn't arrived from where he went the last night. She quickly puts a call through to Walter after several call attempts. In the next scene, Carissa tortures Mark with a sharp rod and urges him to be quiet to save some of his energy. Probably should have listened to the random guy from the restaurant. After that, Tanya goes to ask Randy if he recently contacted Mark but he says no. Later, Carissa checks Mark's phone and finds out his mom has been calling. So, she texts Tanya with Mark's phone to come to pick him up at her place. Tanya immediately goes to Carissa's house and confronts her to send her son out at once but Carissa pleads with her to have a discussion with her. Carissa later forces her to wear a pair of handcuffs if she wants to see her son again. Later, Carissa throws Tanya in the same room with Mark and asks her to either use the single round in the gun she's holding on herself or end Mark's misery. In the next scene, Randy tries Tanya's number but she doesn't answer it since her phone is with Carissa. Soon, Tanya notices that Mark is cold and can't respond, so she tries to terminate herself to rescue him but the gun only clicks. Just then, Carissa shouts for Tanya to ensure there is a bang from a gunshot before she can open the door. Tanya instead chooses to break Mark loose with a bullet. When Carissa opens the door thinking Tanya had shot herself, Tanya attacks her and successfully knocks her out. After that, Carissa later rises up to go after them as Tanya tries to take Mark back home. Randy shows up just in time to take Carissa out. Suddenly, Randy hears a jiggle in a box beside him and goes to open it. Walter pops out of that box to his surprise. Then, they all go home. In the next scene, Walter helps Mark load his luggage in the boot as he prepares to travel to college. He bids Tanya and Randy goodbye as he leaves. Thanks for watching, guys.